and welcome to this video module on leverage buyout modeling, part 3 of 3. We're going to flip into our Excel LBO demo model and finish it out. I'm focused on the LBO summary page now, since we know that we have our model working and balanced no matter what we throw at it. First thing I want to focus on is the IRR calculation. So, as we've learned in our DCF model, one way to look at the exit from an investment is as an EBITDA multiple. So I've just taken, in this calculation block, our final year of the projection model EBITDA, which we can see is $270 million. We've got an assumed exit multiple in here. We know from doing our valuation, our comps, that we had companies in the 11 range, our precedent transactions in the 12 range. I'm just being really conservative here, just showing a 9 times. Nobody knows where multiples will be. This is a 3-year horizon. But the product of those two is our TEV. And what we need to note now for a return on investment, we need to back out the debt that remains at that point, the net debt. So this formula just captures that. It's got balance sheet L32 minus L8. As we can see, that is balance sheet L32, our total debt, minus our remaining cash on the balance sheet. So we've got our terminal net debt. So the difference between TEV and net debt is our terminal equity. And then we can compare that when we look at our initial equity, terminal equity, a 3-year horizon. If we look in the cell at the formula, we can get our IRR. And I've just used the formula that we went through in the module, where it's present value times 1 plus the IRR raised to the years equals future value. By moving the algebra around, we get this formula here, and we're left with an IRR of 33, right in the butter zone, the sweet spot of what private equity firms, financial sponsors will be looking for in an LBO. Now, just want to show you a few things. If we switch from scenario 1 to scenario 2, our IRR goes down. That was the scenario where we had to put up a lot more equity than we did in scenario 1. Likewise, if we move to scenario 3, our IRR is much higher than we started. We started at 33, now it's almost 41. So it just shows you that basically one of the main drivers is the amount of that equity contribution. So companies, financial sponsors often want to borrow as much as they can. Nothing too ridiculous where they won't be able to pay it back, because they'll wind up just, if they can't pay it back, they hand their equity over to the banks and the lenders. But they usually want to stretch to borrow as much as they can, and that's why it really does leverage buyout, the L in the leverage buyout really does boost the returns. Just want to show you that the loan amortization really doesn't have much of an effect on IRR. So if we went and we said we had an 8-year term loan, let's change it to a 2-year term loan. Just prove our balance sheet still balances. We're actually having to borrow a lot on the line of credit, but it is having a very, very negligible change on IRR. It went from 33.9 to 34.1, just a bit of the tax effects of interest there. So really debt doesn't have, the way the debt is amortized doesn't have much of an effect. What does have a big effect, there's a couple of these cells that I've highlighted in blue, is the EBITDA multiple. So instead of a 9 times, if they can get out at 11 times, huge boost to the IRR. And likewise, the initial purchase price. So instead of paying $1.7 billion, suppose the bankers on the sell side convinced them to pay $2 billion. Well, oof, very low IRR. The numbers probably aren't working under this scenario, unless they could think of, well, maybe we get out at 12 times. All right, well, there's, now our IRR works. So let's just go back to what we had for our original model. But you can see those two, the exit multiple and the purchase price, have such a big effect that it's worth presenting to clients a range, a data table, a sensitivity analysis. So Excel has a great function for this. I'm just going to highlight our box here. Tell you first, in the corner, we put basically the value that we want to sensitize. So IRR, we want to see various IRRs based on changing these two parameters, exit multiple and purchase price. So I'm just going to highlight this whole range of cells. I'm going to go into data table, and I know that my row input cell is my EBITDA multiple. That's the one going across, staying the same in the row. And likewise, the one that's fixed in the column is my purchase equity. Now it doesn't look like it's worked, but we do, if you look up in our note here, we have to hit F9, the calculation function in Excel, and I'm just going to format these just so they look like percentages. One more thing we can do to make it even easier to read is, because say our financial sponsor wants to see scenarios that have 30% and higher IRR. So basically they know if they're going to get out at 8 times, there's nothing that works for them. If they're going to get out at 9 times, they need to pay as little as possible. If they're going to get out at 12 times, geez, they could be convinced to really pay up. Now, let's do what Excel calls conditional formatting. We'll go into Format, Conditional Formatting. We're going to add a new one. I want what's called a classic, and I want cells that contain a cell value greater than, and we'll just say, since we want 30% and higher, greater than 0.2999. And that's Excel doing its conditional formatting for us. You can see that this works as I change here. If I move that to 10, I just have to hit F9 again, and you can see that formatting updates back to 8, F9. So this highlights for us all of the scenarios, or the scenarios that we've laid out, in which the sponsor can get the return that he wants. At a 9 times multiple, can't pay a whole lot. At a 12 times multiple, can kind of pay over the moon. That basically wraps up the LBO analysis. And the way this can be used is for a banker can pitch a deal to a sponsor. And like I said, a lot of things are dependent on the exit multiple, the purchase price, and these funding scenarios. But they could pitch a deal to a sponsor and say, hey, look, we found a company out there. It's for sale. We think you can get it for $1.9 billion, and we think you're going to be able to get out at 11 times. Why don't you give it a look? The bank then gets possibly some M&A advisory work. They could get some work on the financing side. They may even, in 3 years' time, be able to advise on the liquidation event for the financial sponsor, which could be another sale, possibly a sale to a strategic, or better yet for the bank, an IPO, where they get quite a high fee. So that's LBO at a glance. I hope you enjoyed it.